All right, let's go ahead and get started with talking about how it is that we can save data permanently inside of our apps. And we kind of had the big example from last time when we tried to save our favorite memorable places, and every time we reopen the app, essentially everything that we had just saved, those memorable places, they were gone. So there's a couple of ways that you can save data inside of Android. You can work with shared preferences. That's what we're going to cover right now. You can work with databases. That's kind of the more bigger, robust option there. And for different apps, different situations are going to, the shared preferences versus the database is going to work better. There's all sorts of different use cases out there. But let's go ahead and start first with our shared preferences. We're going to learn about that, make an app or two, and then we're going to move on to databases and talk about that, and again, make an app or two there. So let's go ahead and start a new Android Studio project to learn about shared preferences. Let's go ahead and just make that the name of our app. So shared preferences. Excellent. We'll just do the default for all this good stuff, and we'll get moving forward. So the basic idea with shared preferences is it's supposed to contain small amounts of information. So ideally, maybe the user has, for example, the way they want the background color in the app to look, or if they've chosen to have dates displayed in 24-hour increments versus the 12 with AM, PM. I don't know, just little tiny things. You should be able to save inside of the shared preferences. Now, if you're making some super big, robust app, right, where you're saving a ton of data, shared preferences is going to really get stretched. And in fact, when we go and apply this to our Memorable Places app, you'll see how it kind of has some limitations there. But enough with that. Let's just go ahead and dive in with an example. So we don't need to do any layout stuff here. This is all going to be code for the beginning part of this. So first, let's just talk about how we get to the shared preferences. Well, there's a class called shared preferences, and it looks like I've typed too early that Android Studio hasn't had a chance to catch up to me yet. So we'll go ahead, give this a second. There we go. So we get our shared preferences. I'm just going to call this lowercase shared preferences, and let's give ourselves some room to type. So this should be equal to this.get shared preferences. So this kind of gets us to where those are stored. Now you want to go ahead and reference, so the first thing, the name that it's looking for this parameter here is it's wanting to know what the name of the app is. So lucky for us, if we just go up to where it says package, if we just copy exactly what's up there, we want to copy, paste that right below, that's what we're looking for, okay? Now the next thing that it's asking for here is it's asking, how is it that you want this to be saved? So if we type out capital context dot, there's a couple of different options in here, but we want mode and we want private. So, and let's add a semicolon at the end there. So the basic idea here is that you can have shared preferences that can be shared between apps. Like if you have a series of apps that, you all want to use sort of the same combined piece of data, you can do that. But in our situation, we want all this information just for our app. So that's why we provided our app name and said, hey, we want mode private, just keep things right here, okay? Now that we've got that in place, let me go ahead and walk you through a very quick example. So the things that you can save inside of shared preferences, they're like strings, arrays, ints, doubles, kind of basic types of information. So let's go ahead and just try and save a string, for example. So we're going to get access to these shared preferences that we had before. Notice the lowercase shared preferences. So we'll say shared preferences.edit, because we want to alter or save some information in there. And we're going to say .put, and this will show you the different things that you can put in there. For example, booleans, floats, long strings, a string set, right? So in our case, we just want to learn how to add a string. So first you have to give a name to the string. This is not the actual string that you want to save. So in this example, let's save, let's say we have an app that takes in a username, right? Whatever the user wants to call themselves. So if we're taking in a username, the first string should be called username, right? That's not what the user typed in. It's just saying, hey, the thing that we're trying to save is a username. This is kind of similar to when we were working with extras, right? Whenever we put an extra into an intent, we had to give it a name so that when we pulled it back out, we could grab that. So then the next piece of information, the next string that we want to add in here is the actual name. So if it was my username, I'd want my username to be something like Nick. So I want to put a string inside of shared preferences called username, but it holds the actual value of Nick. Okay. So once we've got that, you want to do a .apply. That essentially saves that into the shared preferences. Now to go ahead and grab information out of the shared preferences, right? This right here, this is putting information into the shared preferences. We're editing there. Now to get information back out, again, we're going to type out shared preferences, but in this case, we're going to do .get, and you can see we can get strings, longs, floats, booleans, all this awesome stuff. So we want to go ahead and get a string. So we're going to say get string. Now it's going to ask us for the name of what it is that we're looking for. So in this case, we'll just provide username like we have right there. And the next thing that we need to provide here is a default value. So this is just in case, it's not able to find anything under the username, then it's going to give back sort of this default information. So we'll just put an empty string here to say, hey, if you can't find anything, just give us an empty string. All right, so this will kick us back a string. Let's go ahead and save this somewhere. So I'm going to say capital string username should be equal to this. And to confirm that this is working, and I should get our emulator up and running in the background because that does take a second to get going. I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, let's log out this information. So we'll say, oops, not that big thing. Oh, and looks like let's try and run that one more time. Now it says it's already running. Maybe it's just being finicky. I don't know. But remember, we want to log out some information. So we'll say log.i. And we want to first say that, something like this is the username. And then we'll go ahead and provide whatever is inside of the username string, just like that. Okay. So now that we've got this all in place, let's go ahead and see. Oh yeah, our emulator's still kicking up there. So I'll go ahead and start the video once this loads up. All right, we finally got the app to open up here. Let's go ahead and check Logcat, see if we got anything that says something like this is username. So we'll go ahead and move up for a second here. I'm not seeing anything. Oh, there it is. This is the username, Nick. Okay, so this worked, and just to kind of prove that this is actually working and that, this wasn't just some sort of fluke that, oh, we just made it here, saved it. It does not actually saved in there. Let's go ahead and comment out this line of code where we save in the name Nick, and let's just say, open up the app, go and try and pull something called username, okay? So we'll go ahead and hit run here. This is sort of our test to see, hey, was this able to save the information that we put inside of shared preferences last time? So app opens up, and look at that. This is the username Nick. So this means we were successfully, from last time, able to save some information. And this time, we didn't put anything inside. We just simply said pull out whatever's inside of username, and we were able to do that, okay? So give yourself a nice little pat on the back. You successfully saved your very first thing inside of shared preferences, okay? Now let's go ahead and comment out the rest of this code for a second here, because I'm going to show you then how we can save an array of things. Because remember, with our memorable places app, we wanted to save an array of the places and the particular locations that they were associated with, right? Like we want all that information. And the problem is right now, if we go to like shared preferences and we want to say put whatever, or we have to do shared preferences edit first. There we go. .put, right? Like we can only do put string, put boolean. You might be wondering, well, how's all that supposed to work? Well, let me show you here. So the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to create an array list. So let's just say we want to save an array list of some friends. So we'll just say array list that's supposed to be of a bunch of strings, and we'll just call it friends. Okay, so this is equal to a new array list, semicolon that, and then let's add some friends in here. So we'll say friends. Oh, and I misspelled friends up here. I was wondering why the autocomplete wasn't going. Friends.add, let's maybe add Fido. Friends.add, let's add like Sarah in there. And we'll do one more. We'll say friends dot, oh, not finish and remove task. Friends dot add, and let's add our last friend, Jones. Okay, so we've got an array list of 3 items in there. Simple enough, right? But again, if you were wondering, okay, so I've got this now fresh array list. I go to my shared preferences, I say dot edit on this, and I'm going to put, but we can only put a string, boolean, float, int, long, or string set. Now it might be tempting to do the string set because, you know, sets kind of like arrays, except for sets don't hold order. They just hold uniqueness. So we could have an issue if we have duplicate items, but even more, like with the memorable places, we want to make sure it's in a particular order. And, you know, maybe our friends here, this is our ranking of our top friends, and, you know, we want it to stay the same. So something that we can do is we can serialize this array list and turn it into a string. And serializing, basically, it's kind of like turning, when we turned our data into JSON and then JSON back into data. It's a way to kind of turn everything into a string, and so that then we can pull it back out. So in order to do this, I mean, ultimately what we're going to do is put a string, but we're going to have to serialize this information first. So we're going to go up to Android Studio File, New, and we want to add a new class. So just go here to Java class. And the name that we're looking for here is Object Serializer. Make sure we get that spelled correctly. Serializer. Okay, once you got that, go ahead and hit OK. And then there's this class called Object Serializer that allows you to do this with Java objects. Although Rob has created one specifically for this course. It's pretty close to the original. It just handles exceptions a little bit differently. So for this one, just go ahead and go to Android devcourse.com/object serializer.html. Okay. So if you go ahead and go to this page, this is going to contain the code that Rob has created for us that's going to allow us to serialize this stuff. So again, this is really close to the object serializer that we have in Java. I mean, if you want to know more information about this, just go ahead and type out object serializer Java, and you can see what that looks like. But for our course here, let's go ahead and copy this code, and we'll come back to Android Studio, and we'll just go ahead and select everything except for that top package part, okay? And we'll go ahead and paste that information in there, okay? So basically the code inside of here, it allows us to, again, turn something and serialize it, and I'll show you how to use it now. So we're gonna come back here. Remember, we wanna do a put string, but before that, now what we're going to do is we're gonna make a new object from this. So we're going to say capital Object Serializer dot deserialize. Oh, excuse me here. So we've got this, and we want to say Object Serializer, the deserialize when we want to like undo it, but we want to say serialize, and we're going to pass in our friends array list just like that. And once we've gone ahead and done that, then this should give us back a string. Now we're getting a little bit of a thing here because we got to surround this with a try catch because something might go wrong here. And I'm going to extend this out to be just a straight up exception. But really, this is all we need in order to make things work. Like this will give us back a proper string. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut this line of code here, paste it. And so the string that we're going to put in is actually just going to be, we'll just copy this, cut it and paste it right inside of there, or put our semicolon at the end, and this essentially will take our array list here and it's going to turn it into one single string. Okay, so once we've gone ahead and done this, we want to make sure that we apply all of it. So we're going to do a dot apply at the end there, and let's see. Oh, with this, I forgot we've got to put a name inside of here. So make sure you have your double quotes and then a comma. So just like before when we were saying, you know, this is username, right? Like we have to give some sort of name here. Let's call this just simply friends, okay? So now putting in a string called friends, and we're using this object serializer to turn this list of friends into that. Now, something that I think we should do that will be just kind of interesting is to see what the serialized string looks like. Let's go ahead and just log it. So let's say log.i, and we're going to pass inside of here the name friends. So we'll go ahead and paste that. And then let's go and add this whole thing here. Okay. Because I will, kind of give you an idea of what's going on in the background here. But once we go ahead and have this in place, let's talk about how we can then take these friends back out. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an array list of strings. And let's just go ahead and call this new friends, because this is going to be the information coming out of shared preferences. So we'll have this equal to a new array list. Great. And then this is the part where we take our new friends and we set it equal to the deserialization of something. So we're going to say here, capital object serializer dot deserialize. Okay, and you can see that it was looking for a string inside of here. So the string that we want to pass it is whatever we get back from the shared preferences. So in here, we're going to type shared preferences dot get string. And we've got to provide in what name we're looking for, and so that's lowercase friends. And then the next thing is we have to provide some sort of default value. Now, it's a little bit tempting here to just put in an empty string, but if for some reason we aren't able to get back the proper piece of information, well, then we would just want to pass in, like the serializer is going to break. So in this case, we want to pass in just a new serialized empty array list. I know it sounds a little bit confusing here, but that's essentially what we're looking for. So we're going to pass inside of here object serializer dot serialize, and we're going to do a new array list of type string. Okay. So again, nothing inside of here. In fact, we got that open and close parentheses. But essentially what that does is it allows us to give back an empty string just in case. So let's go ahead and surround this also with a try catch. So we'll do a try here, then we'll go ahead and catch it with exception e, and we'll do our e.print stack trace. Okay. Now the last piece of information that we've got to do to make this work is we have to cast back this object serializer to say, hey, that this thing's going to come back as an array list. So what we're going to do is just put our parentheses here and say, hey, this thing is going to come back as an array list of type string. So you can see even the autocomplete helped us out there to get that all working. Now let's go ahead and run this. So there's a couple cool things that I want to check out here. We should, one, make sure that when we do this log, we want to see how it did the serialization stuff, but then we also want to print out or log out this new friends, which I guess I forgot to do. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say log I, and we want to log out new friends. I guess I should call it first in a string. We'll say new friends, just like that. And then we're going to pass in new friends dot to string. Okay, so there's two logs that we're looking for. The first one is how it did the serialization, and then the second one is that we're going to get back the new friends array list to make sure we got back everything correctly. So let's run this now. Get our emulator up here. Get logcat2, and here it comes. So app opens up. And let's go ahead and scroll, see what we got. So first off, we can very simply see here that new friends, this successfully turned it into Fido, Sarah, Jones, right? And that was the exact order that we had, Fido, Sarah, Jones, right? We got those back. That works completely just like we were hoping for. Now the surprising part, when we said turn our friends array list into a serialized thing, which turns it into a string, look at what it gave us. It's this... I mean, to us as humans, this just looks like absolute gibberish. But to Java, it will be able to take this, and it did successfully turn it back into an array list. And this is all about sort of machines being able to talk to machines efficiently in a very efficient way. So I know, looks a little bit crazy, but I wanted you to sort of see how the sausage is made here with all of that. Now, just like we did earlier, just to confirm that this is all working, let's go ahead and comment out all the code where we add in our friends array list. So let's go ahead and do a multi-line starting there, and we'll end it there. And I just want to see if we can log out the new friends from what should be saved inside of shared preferences. So we'll go ahead and run this and see what we get back. Okay, so it looks like the emulator opened up. So let's open up Logcat, and look at that. We get Fido, Sarah, and Jones. So we know for sure that we were able to save in that information and pull it back and turn it into an array list. Pretty cool stuff there, okay? All right, with all of this in place, it's now time to move back into our Memorable Places app and apply this so that we will be able to successfully save those places from session to session. Now, I'm going to offer this as a challenge, right? I just taught you this new skill and I want you to apply it to our previous project. Of course, if you're not feeling 100% comfortable, you can just go ahead and watch it with me, but I would recommend going and giving this a try. So if you're so inclined, go fix Memorable Places so that it will save in the places into shared preferences. Okay, go ahead, hit pause now. All right, so we want to make changes to our Memorable Places app, so let's go ahead and open that. I'm going to go to my recent projects, and look, there's Memorable Places. So I'm going to open this up in a new window here. Now, in order to work with this, we're going to need that object serializer class that we had before right here from Rob. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just copy this name so that I make sure I don't misspell it. And in this new project, I'm going to say File, New Class, paste in object serializer. Then I'm going to go back to Rob's code, copy all of this, back to Android Studio, make sure I keep the package, but then paste in all that information, okay? So that's a nice starting point for us. Then let's go ahead and move over to our maps activity. Okay, so the place that we want to make some changes to here is whenever we are going to be, saving a new piece of information, right? And so right now, whenever someone does one of these long presses, we go through all this information to get the address, come down here, and then we add the marker. And then right now, we're adding that new address into, the places array list, and we're adding the lat long object into the locations, and we say, hey, list view, go notify yourself of all these new changes, and that stuff is all fine. That's good. But then it's after this is where we want to say, hey, whatever inside of this places array, whatever inside of these locations, let's go ahead and save these things into shared preferences, and then afterwards we'll still do that toast to say the location was saved. So what we want to do here is first get access to our shared preferences. So we'll just say shared preferences is equal to this.get shared preferences. And then we'll go ahead and pass in the name of our app, which is up here at the top. Excellent. And we'll paste that. Then we got to go ahead and say how we want this to be saved, and we want this to be private, so we're going to do mode private and add our semicolon there. Okay, so that gives us access to shared preferences. Then what we've got to do is we've got to start to save things. So for the places array list, we know how to save an array list via a string, right? We just did that with the whole serialization stuff. So let's go ahead and create first a try catch, because we're going to need that. So try and catch, we look for the old exception E, and we'll print that out. Awesome. And then the code that we want to run inside of here is we're going to get access to our shared preferences. We want to do an edit because we're trying to save. So we're going to say edit, and we want to put a string, and this is going to be for the places array list. So just let's go ahead and type out lowercase places, just like that. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to serialize the places array list. So we'll say capital object serializer dot serialize, and again what we want to pass in is this main activity dot places. So we'll just type out main activity dot places, just like that. Okay, Once we've done that, we want to do a dot apply to sort of save our information there. And that's all it takes in order to save the places array list inside of there. Now, when it comes to locations, it's a little bit trickier because places, let me go ahead and go back to that main activity so you can see this. Places is an array list of string objects, where locations is an array list of lat-long objects. And the serializer class that we have isn't able to take a lat-long object and serialize it into a big string. It can work with like strings, doubles, ints, floats, kind of the basic types. But for a lat-long, that's not one of the options for us. So we kind of have to deconstruct our lat-longs in order to do all of this. And essentially all that a lat-long is a latitude and a longitude. It's sort of right there in the name. So what we're going to do is first we're going to create two new array lists for latitudes and longitudes. So we're going to say, let's make an array list, and it's important we want these to be strings because an array list of strings can be saved and serialized into shared data. So we'll say array list of strings that we'll call latitudes is going to be equal to a new array list, just like that. And we're going to copy this so that we can paste it down below and say we also want to do this for longitudes. Okay, so we have this new array list for latitudes and longitudes, and we want to fill these up with the correct information. So probably best to do that with a for loop. So let's go ahead and make a for loop here. We'll just do our int I is equal to 0, classic. Then we want to go ahead and do this for however many things are in the locations array. And so we're going to go ahead and type out I. Well, in fact, if we're doing a for loop here, maybe it's better to do a for loop where we don't use I and we just move through each of the objects. So in fact, let's go ahead and change this. We're going to do lat long, and I'm going to call this chords for coordinate. And we're going to say do this for main activity dot location. So this says go ahead and loop through everything inside of locations away. This will make it just a little bit easier to work with because each time it just gives us a different coordinate. So now we can say latitudes dot add, and what we need to do is we need to turn that double into a string. So we're going to say capital double dot toString, and then we're going to pass in chord dot latitude. Okay, so that's going to fill up our latitude array list, and let's go ahead and copy and paste this for our longitude. So it's important that you change this to longitudes and you change this to longitude there. All right, so now that we have that for loop in place, that means we now have two array lists that we can save into shared preferences. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this line of code, right, where we are right now serializing the places, and I'm just going to paste it twice for our latitudes and longitudes. And I'm going to call the string for this one lats, and I'm going to call this one longs, and I'm just going to, rather than saying main activity.places, this is going to be latitudes and this is going to be longitudes. Okay, open, looks like we missed. Oh no, we just had the dot places. There we go. So now we are essentially saving three different array lists into shared preferences, right? We're doing the places, but then also this new latitude and longitudes, all right? So with those pieces in place, let's go ahead and just make sure our app works as it is right now. So let's go ahead and run this on our emulator. And really the next step for us is we just want to make sure that we can get this information out of our app successfully, meaning that when we open the app again that we can pull that information. So we'll wait for this app to open up. There it is. And let's say we add a new place. And let's go ahead and give it a position so that we can not be in the middle of the ocean. Yay, we're back in New York. So I'm going to do a long press here on the map. And look at that, location saved. So we should have something saved there, but we don't have any code so that if we were to, example, open this app again, right? Like if I did a double click on this, let's see, shared preferences, and oh no, I want to do this memorable places. Okay, I got to go home first. Oh, I should not have long pressed that. There we go. Okay, so let's say I go home, and then I double click this, and I X out. This is driving me nuts. I'm supposed to be able to, okay, let's try it one time. I guess it only needed one click. But if I close out of memorable places and then I come back and I open it up, there's memorable places. It should have had my location saved, but it didn't. So that's the code that we want to write now. So that's going to be inside of our main activity, right? When the main activity opens up here and it's listing everything in that list view, this is where we want to show those locations from the shared preferences. So here inside of main activity, before we go ahead and do this places.add and all that good stuff, right? We want to go ahead and write a little bit of code before that. So up here at the top, first thing that we got to do is we got to get access to our shared preferences. So again, just shared preferences, lowercase shared preferences is equal to this dot get shared preferences. I'm going to provide the name of the app. Okay, go ahead and copy and paste that. And then also want to go say capital context dot mode private. Okay, so that gives us access to shared preferences. The next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to have the array list for the latitudes and the longitudes. So let's just go ahead and create a new array list that's going to hold a bunch of strings. And we'll just call this, in fact, let's just go back to this maps activity. We're going to copy these two array lists because they're essentially going to have the exact same name. We'll just go ahead and paste it right like that, okay? So we're making our array lists of latitudes and longitudes. Then we want to go attempt to pull this out of shared preferences. So let's get a try catch ready. So there's our try. And then we'll just catch any and all exception that we'll call E. And we'll go ahead and print that out. All right, so inside of the try now, this is where we want to try and go and get things. So the first thing, let's just go ahead and get the places. So we're going to say places is equal to, and we want to get to object serializer dot deserialize. So this is looking for a string. So let's go ahead and give it a string. We're going to say, let's go to our shared preferences dot get string, and we have to provide the name first of what we're looking for. In this case, we're just looking for places, so we'll go ahead and put that. And then we have to give it, some sort of example or default in case we weren't able to get things back. So let's go back to here where we were adding in our default, and oh no, we did that in the other application. So let's go back to our shared preferences. Remember when we just said, hey, object serializer, make a new array list, blah, blah, blah. We'll get all of that in place. So just go ahead and copy that. We'll come back to our other project here and go back to main activity, and we'll paste that right inside. Okay, so with this, we have to go ahead and cast this to say this is going to come back as an array list of strings, and that is all it takes to get our places. Okay, but the next thing that we need to do here is we need to go get the latitudes and the longitudes. So it's kind of eerily similar to this line of code. So in fact, let's just go ahead, oh, don't forget your semicolon. Let's go ahead and copy this line of code, and we will paste it twice so that we can change it for the latitudes and longitudes. So in this case, we're going to say latitudes, and when we come down here for our places, remember we called this lats. Let's confirm. Yeah, we called that lats and lawns. So we're going to get our lats. This one, we're going to get our lawns, and we'll just change this one to longitudes. Okay. So with all that information in place, that should go ahead and grab each of the things, right? It should grab the places, the latitudes, and longitudes. Now, if this is the case, we want to go ahead and we have a little bit of a tricky situation here, right? And that's with these latitude and longitudes. These ultimately need to go in and fill up our locations array list. And so, we're going to have to do a little bit of work to make that happen. Now, before we do any of that, we need to clear out everything here to make sure that we're working with fresh array lists. So places dot clear. We want to do this same for the latitudes dot clear. We want to do this for our longitudes dot clear. And we also want to do this for our locations. Let's just go ahead, clear out all of these arrays, make sure nothing's inside of there, and that we can start fresh. Okay, so we've done all that clearing. Then we're going to come down here and we're going to say, after we've done all this try catch stuff, we want to do a check and make sure that we can actually take these latitude and longitudes and put them into locations. So first, let's write an if statement here, and this if statement is just going to check and see if we have the proper arrays that we're looking for. So first, let's go ahead and check places. We're going to say if places dot size is greater than 0, and we're going to say, and we want to go ahead and check latitudes. So we're going to say latitudes dot size is greater than 0, and if longitudes dot size is greater than 0. So this essentially says we're not moving forward unless we've got latitudes, longitudes, and places arrays. Okay. Then the next check that we're going to see is make sure that the latitudes and the longitudes are the exact same size as the places. So we'll do another if statement here, and this time we're going to say places dot size and check and see if this is doubles equal sign equal to latitudes dot size. And let's do the same thing for the longitudes. We'll say places dot size is equal to longitudes dot size. Okay, so that's going to be a quick test for us to make sure that everything's of the same size here. Now, if that is the case, then we're going to go ahead and move forward by doing a for loop, and this is where we're going to take the latitudes and the longitudes and merge them into the locations array list. So we're going to say for, and this time we actually do want to go ahead and use an int I because we're going to be working with two different array lists here. So we're going to say int I is equal to 0 as long as I is less than the latitudes dot size, and you could have chosen places, latitudes, longitudes because we just checked here that they were all the same size. And then we'll just go ahead and say I plus plus. Okay, so now that we're here, this is where we sort of add everything together. So we're going to say locations dot add, and remember it's looking for a lat long object, so we're going to say new lat long, and it's just looking for two doubles, and this is the latitude and the longitude. So the first one we'll say capital double dot parse double. So if we pass this a string, it will go ahead and turn it into a double. So we'll just simply say latitudes dot get at I. Okay, and then we also want to do this for our longitude. So we're going to say double dot parse double, and we're going to say longitudes dot get, and we'll pass in an index of I. Okay, so let's not forget our semicolon there. So this is the line of code that sort of reconstructs everything and adds all of that back together. Now, the last thing that we need to do is we need to have an else statement on here. So if these things aren't the same size, right, all that information, if there's for some reason these didn't come back, well, that probably means that this is the first time that the app's been opened. So in that case, this is where we'd want to add, a new item into places and location, right, for that very first one. So we'll go ahead and place that code right inside there. Okay, so with that in place, let's go ahead and run our app, see what it looks like. This is sort of a big moment of truth for us. So looks like everything finished up. It's going to relaunch our app. So here you can see it already had a location from before, so that should tell us that we're in a pretty good location. But let's go pick a new place on the map here, something on Rikers Island. Okay, so if I hit the back button, look at that. There's something on Hazen Street. If we click on it, it's going to take us back there. Now let's go ahead and say, we do our double click here. Nope, I think only one click. I keep wanting to do double, but if I hit the X on memorable places, so we've essentially cleared out the app, right? And we come back to it here and we open it up. Oh my goodness, look at that. It has the same locations, and we can click on these and get back to them. And just to really prove that this is the case, I'm going to go ahead and run this app one more time on the emulator so you can see whether we physically close out of the app or we just relaunch it here from Android Studio. Look at that. The information is saved here. So give yourself a nice big pat on the back. We turned what essentially was an app with a ton of promise but didn't ultimately deliver because it didn't save anything, and now it's completely functional. So you did see we had a little bit of struggle here, right, with this whole having to take the lat long objects, put them into 2 separate array lists, save those in, pull them back out, then recreate the locations. Like, it was kind of messy. So you'll notice as we go through and learn about databases, there will be some situations where it's like, oh, the database makes sense, but there will also be situations where the shared preferences make sense. We're going to make a notes app that you'll say, oh, yeah, that's definitely a good idea there. So we have 2 Android skills that we need to learn before we go ahead and make the Notes app. So we're going to go ahead and cover those first, then we'll go make that Notes app, okay? So let's keep trucking.